very bad position to be in terms of management, where he has to fill those slots. He hasn't gotten the existing guys on the table. He hasn't gotten new players on the table. And so we might wind up with gaps or players who don't necessarily belong in those positions, or pulling up people from somewhere like Wilkes-Barre to fill those slots temporarily until we can actually get some players on the table. And it puts a damper on long-term plans. Like if you're trying to make a cup run, it's very difficult to do that if you don't have the proper team to do it with.
Absolutely. And the fourth line, of course, Ruff and Ashland's still up in the air. I've been hearing a lot of talk about Joe Vitale possibly coming up for the season. What does a guy like Joe Vitale bring to the Penguins roster, and especially on that fourth line where it seems he's likely to play?
He's a Mike Rupp type player that's not afraid to get in a fight, not afraid to get his hands dirty, throw out some big hits, great on the forecheck. You saw him in limited action last year, and he was pretty good then, especially taking people out in that Islanders game, the one that we still refer to as game, even though that's not really what it was.
Absolutely.
So you saw Vitale a couple times, and he's a physical, rough type third or fourth line grinder, and he's pretty good.
Absolutely. And in place of all the injuries last year, two of the biggest names that kind of came up were Dustin Jeffrey, and Mark Letestu. Is the roster spot going to be big enough for both of these guys this season, or if you had to pick one or the other, which do you think is best to stay on the roster? Which one do you think is best to go to the AHL?
I think for me, I'd pick Letestu because he's younger. He has more potential years in his future. He put up better overall numbers, less injuries overall last season. He's apparently working better with a lot of the team. It's dependent, though, on what he does with his contract this year, because we've already re-signed Dustin Jeffrey, and we're trying to see what we're going to be doing with Letestu. I'm pretty sure he's on board, but the big question will be what does his future with the Penguins organization look like?
Absolutely, and certainly a productive year for him last year, named Penguins Rookie of the Year. And speaking dipping into the past, possibly to build a championship contender, they're looking at Jaromir Jagr now. That's a big story of the offseason, if not the biggest one. His contract with his KHL team expired. He's talking about a return to the NHL. He's kind of narrowed it down to two teams, Pittsburgh and Detroit. There was a rumor of a third team for a while. Not really sure if the third team's still in it. Third teamer was rumored to be Montreal. How close do you think, after talking with Mario, after talking with Shira, how close do you think Jaromir Jagr is to returning to his original team? And if so, if he does return, what do you think he brings to the Penguins in terms of someone who might be able to help out Sidney Crosby on that top line?
Well, in this case, I think what we're seeing, the bureaucracy of the situation is mostly from Jagr's agent trying to get him as much money as possible, because he knows there's not a lot of time left in Jagr's career. So the big question mark is still the price tag. If it's Detroit, if it's Pittsburgh, if he's going to have to wind up coming down on the price, or if he might even wind up going back to the KHL, as some have suggested. So I think we won't really know, and that's the mystery of it. We won't really know until the first what's exactly going to happen with the whole Jaromir Jagr situation.
Absolutely, and of course the Penguins not the only one making off-season noise. Philadelphia trades Jeff Carter and Mike Richards both in one day. Jeff Carter goes to the Columbus Blue Jackets in exchange for a third-round pick and Jakub Voracek. Of course, Mike Richards goes to the Los Angeles Kings in exchange for prospect Braden Shen, who I know has generated a lot of buzz in California, as well as Wayne Simmons. As far as the Mike Richards deal, who gets the better end of this deal? Obviously, LA gets Mike Richards. Philadelphia gets back a guy in Wayne Simmons who's a grinder with a little bit of scoring potential, and then a prospect like Braden Shen. Who do you think got the overall better deal in this trade?
Well, in this case, I think for availability this year, it's going to be the Kings got the better end of the deal with getting Richards. In the future, I think it'll depend on how Braden Shen actually pans out. Will he be a bust, or will he be the player that everybody thinks that he's going to be? And that's the big question. I mean, because the potential is there, but he's still untested.
Absolutely. And What do you think? What do you make of the trades here from Philadelphia's standpoint? What were they really trying to do? They got rid of two of their key players. One, a marquee player, a fan favorite, and their team captain. What do you think the motivation was for Holmgren up in Philadelphia?
Well, they had the idea of throwing money at the situation and trying to get into the Cup this last season in 2010, 2011, trying to get in. And it was largely a bust. I mean, they made it to the second round, but they spent enough money and expended their cap enough for the next couple seasons that they're going to have a lot of trouble in the GM area. The Brizgalov deal, they spent all that money on Ilya Brizgalov, and they've been shuffling people here, shuffling people there. You almost have to wonder if they've even got the cap space for someone like Mike Richards.
Of course, and they signed Ilya Brizgalov to try to solve some of those goalie problems that they had last season. A 9-year, $51 million contract, so he's obviously there for the rest of his career, barring a trade. A couple, big-time trades at the draft as well. I think the biggest of which probably Devin Setaguchi going to the Sharks, as well as a prospect from the Boston University in exchange for Brent Burns, a key defenseman on the Minnesota Wild. Who gets the better end of this trade, and why do you think that both teams needed to assess the certain positions they did in this trade in the draft?
I think that's one that you'll have to look at closely. I mean, for San Jose, I think they honestly probably got the short end in losing one of their primary scorers. But at the same time, they had gaps and other issues that they might be able to patch up with this trade. This is one that you'll have to look at in the long run, but for right now, again, I'd probably say San Jose got the short end of this deal.
Absolutely, and of course, Devin Setaguchi, one of the guys that I've heard a lot of the Pens looking for up until this trade. Of course, some other prospects, Radim Verbata, Jokinen was out there for a while as someone who might be able to help on the wing. Who do you think, kind of now, seeing who's been re-signed, who's been traded, who would you say is the top guy that could help the Penguins on that right wing slot in free agency, or perhaps on the trade market, something that we can get for trading one of our players? Who would you look at to be the marquee guy to help the Penguins in that slot?
Well, the number one question right now is Verbata. Is Verbata really a free agent? Is he available? Are the Coyotes going to try and re-sign him? He's a big question mark at this point, and it looks like he probably will be going into free agency. The other question is Shiro already in talks with him? Who's Shiro in talks with for that slot? Because it might be Yager playing a winger slot. It might be Verbata. It might be somebody that we haven't even brought up yet that's in free agency this year because there's large numbers. It might be somebody from Wilkes-Barre. It might be somebody from another league. We don't even know at this point. But I figure Shiro is doing something for that slot.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's all the off-season news we have about for you right now. We will be back soon. We are going to be discussing the Penguins' upcoming schedule, the Boston Bruins Stanley Cup run, and the Jack Adams Award for head coach Dan Bylsma. Stay tuned right here on the Iceberg. Welcome back. The Pittsburgh Penguins season will start 10 p.m. Thursday, October 6th in Vancouver. Of course, the first three games of the season all away in Vancouver and Calgary on that Saturday, the 8th, and then again that Sunday in Edmonton at 9 p.m. What do you think about, I don't know how much you've had a chance to look over the season for the Penguins. Obviously, they play Winnipeg in the first month. They're playing the Islanders twice in the first month. So do you think, and it seems their schedule has gotten a bit tougher this year, do you think they needed a tougher schedule this year considering all that happened